Hi guys, it's me, CHD, and welcome to another episode of the podcast where today we are reviewing what went down at the Japanese Grand Prix weekend, a weekend that was pretty exciting up until race day, where it was the race was itself probably the worst Japanese Grand Prix I think we've ever had. It was unbelievably boring. Yes, the top three was all close and that, and it was threatening to become something, and it was almost the greatest slow burn of a race of all time, but it just nothing ever really happened in the race. And if you look at the top 10 results, which we'll get into in a moment, it finished almost exactly as the top 10 starting grid was, which is quite rare for Suzuka. Even if you look back to last year, you had Sainz and Leclerc third and fourth, and they started in completely different positions to third and fourth on the grid, especially Leclerc, who I think was like 8th or 9th on the grid. So, yeah, it is really unusual for everyone to finish pretty much where they started, but that's unfortunately the way it was. I think one thing that didn't help was Pirelli brought too hard of a tyre to the race weekend. The softest compound was the C3 compound. It really should have been the C4, the soft compound, and then the C3 would have been the medium, and the C2 would have been the hard, and maybe then we could have got at least earlier pit stops and maybe a couple people going for a two-stop race. But if you bring the hardest tyres possible, that's what's going to happen. You're going to get a boring one-stop race, which is seemingly, it feels like that's what Pirelli want in a way with the tyres they bring. It's just really frustrating. But yeah, that's unfortunately the way it was at Suzuka. But anyway, let's get into the results of the Japanese Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, incredibly, wins the Japanese Grand Prix, his fourth win in a row at Suzuka, and is now right in the championship battle. His championship campaign properly kicked off in Japan. Lando Norris just behind in second, and just behind him, Oscar Piastri in third. Fourth, Charles Leclerc. Fifth, George Russell. Sixth, Kimi Antonelli, who had a good weekend. Seventh, Lewis Hamilton. Eighth, Isaac Hadjar. First ever points in Formula One for the Frenchman. Ninth, Alexander Albon, continuing his great season. And 10th, also having a great season, Oliver Bearman. One thing to notice, by the way, we will show the race pace data in terms of, on average, what the lap time difference was from top to bottom. But you'll notice with the gaps, through the top 10 and even down to Hadjar and Albon, not that far off the race winner. Pretty impressive pace and clear evidence that the field is a lot closer than it was a year ago, which is only great news for us. But yeah, that is your top 10 in the Japanese Grand Prix. And as usual, let's just quickly go on to how the championship standings are now affected after that Grand Prix. On the driver's side, the top 10 is Lando Norris in the lead, but only now by 1 point ahead of Max Verstappen. Oscar Piastri 13 points off the lead. In third, George Russell fourth. Russell now 17 points off, but I think Russell will be pretty happy to be only 17 points off after 3 races and a sprint race. Kimi Antonelli in fifth. Charles Leclerc now up to sixth. Alex Albon seventh. Lewis Hamilton eighth. Esteban Ocon in ninth. And Lance Stroll in P10. And then on the constructors' side, McLaren, the first team to break over 100 points. On 111 points they are. Mercedes in second. Mercedes are now 36 points behind the McLaren team. Red Bull now a bit closer to Mercedes in third. Ferrari comfortably up to fourth now, but miles away from McLaren in the lead. And that's why I said, like a week or so ago in a video I did, that I think Ferrari are out of the Constructors' Championship fight, because as you can already see, that gap continuing to build quite big between McLaren and Ferrari. And yeah, it is going to be 100 points, that gap at least, probably in a couple weeks' time. Williams in 5th, Haas in 6th, Aston Martin 7th, Racing Bulls up to 8th. Racing Bulls really should be in at least 6th in the championship, given the pace they've had so far this season, but 8th it is at the moment. Sauber in 9th, and Alpine still pointless in P10. So those are your championship positions. Quite interesting championship standings after the first 3 races. A bit different, I think, than what most of us expected. We all expected McLaren, obviously, to start the year quick, but maybe not. And you know, to start the year leading the championships. But I don't think we thought it'd be as close on the driver's side as it is proving to be. Here is, though, the race pace in Suzuka, the average lap time difference throughout the field, and McLaren and Red Bull separated by pretty much nothing. 0.02 of a second in McLaren's favour. Yeah, Max just doing an incredible job to keep on the same pace as McLaren during the race, and that's why Max was able to keep those McLarens at bay, because he built a gap early on. And then McLaren, despite closing in at times, just couldn't close in enough to affect Max Verstappen. And then Mercedes were 3rd quickest, a 1/4 of a second off the pace. Ferrari slightly slower than Mercedes. I will say Ferrari's race pace was encouraging, to say the least. It wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. Mercedes' race pace, decent, not great, but decent enough. But yeah, Ferrari, a bit encouraging, I would say, that their race pace was pretty much the same as Mercedes, because we saw in Shanghai, Ferrari were a couple tenths of a second off the pace of Mercedes in the race in China. So that's a bit of a plus for Ferrari there. And as you can see, Racing Bulls and Williams only 0.6 of a second per lap off the pace of McLaren and Red Bull. Very, very impressive. And remember, those two teams, Racing Bulls and Williams, do have some of the most wind tunnel development time in the first half of this year. So if they can use that well to their advantage, we could see those two teams become front-running teams in the second half of the season, because they're already not a million miles away, at the start of this season. So yeah, watch out for their progress over the season. I think we could see definitely those two teams getting a podium in this season, especially when we get some mental races in the year, which we normally do at some point. Aston Martin a bit further behind in 7th, Haas slightly slower in 8th, and then slightly slower than Haas Alpine. And then clearly the slowest team, Sauber, which is not really a surprise. But if you forget Sauber there at the bottom, for the top 9, for it to only be 9, pretty much 9.5 tenths of a second covering the top 9 teams on average per lap, that is pretty impressive, again, in terms of how close things are right now in Formula 1. And again, with the lower down teams having a bit more time in the wind tunnel in the first half of this year, theoretically, that should get closer, especially from teams like Racing Bulls and Williams. So we will see how that plays out over the rest of the season. But let's get into what happened for the front-running teams here in Japan. And we will start with the race winners, somehow the race winners, Red Bull Racing. And really, it wasn't Red Bull that won the race, it was Max Verstappen that won the race. He dragged that car somehow onto pole position with one of, if not the best, pole position lap Max Verstappen has ever done. He was on pole by 0.012 of a second ahead of the McLaren of Lando Norris. McLaren, I absolutely believe, had the fastest car in qualifying. They didn't do McLaren their absolute best laps on that final run in Q3. So there was definitely more potential in the car. But at the end of the day, Max produced the goods when it mattered, and that's why he is the 4-time world champion. And then in the race, it was a perfect demonstration of managing the race and delivering right when you have to. Perfect start, built the lead over a second to avoid the McLarens getting DRS. Then at the pit stop phase, Red Bull wasn't the greatest pit stop, but they just about got it right, and Max kept the lead on the exit of the pit lane. I know there was a bit of controversy over, did Max push Norris onto the grass? The answer is absolutely no. Lando just drove onto the grass. There was no room, and Lando was trying to make something out of nothing, really. So, yeah, that happened. And then after that, Max just managed the rest of the race and brought the car home. Yes, the two McLarens were very close at times to him, but he was able just to produce the key bits of lap time right when he had to. And that's why he won the Japanese Grand Prix. And this win in Japan is absolutely massive for him, because the McLaren car is quicker right now. It absolutely is quicker than the Red Bull. So Max has got to make sure that he keeps close, at least in this first bit of the season. And that's exactly what he's doing. As you saw, he's only 1 point behind now in the Drivers' Championship. And I believe they have an upgrade package coming this weekend in Bahrain. If that upgrade package works and puts them on the pace of McLaren, then Max Verstappen is going to start winning quite a few races, because he is quite easily a step above Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. I like Lando and Oscar. I think they're very good drivers, but they are not close to the level of Max Verstappen. And you could argue nobody is on the grid right now. So if that Red Bull does get on to the point where it has the same pace as the McLaren, Max is going to be the favourite all the time, really. So, yeah, it was a crucial win for Verstappen, again, to keep close in the championship. And now, if he can, in these next couple races, the second and third part of this first triple header of the season, if he can win in Bahrain and even in Saudi Arabia, he would obviously take the lead of the championship. And at that point, given that we know realistically Red Bull will get better as the season goes on, they are going to be incredibly hard to stop. Well, not Red Bull, but Max Verstappen on the driver's side. So, yeah, Verstappen in top form. He is, without doubt, one of the greatest drivers we've ever seen in Formula One. And I think this past weekend absolutely magnified that. He is easily, I think at this point, one of the top 5 greatest drivers we've ever seen. Is he the greatest of all time? I am not going to say that yet. I still would like to wait to see, accolade-wise, what he goes on to win in these next few years. But I would not be surprised whatsoever if he does end up being, statistically and overall, everyone's greatest driver of all time. He is certainly heading in that direction. Yuki Tsunoda had a difficult Japanese Grand Prix, ending up, P12, I think it was, behind Fernando Alonso. The pace was not great from Yuki. It really was not. When he stuck behind other cars, he really was not threatening that much to overtake them. And in general was just struggling, I think, with the car. I do think Tsunoda could have done better. I think he could have finished in P10. Oliver Behrman, who finished in 10th, was only 4 seconds up the road. So I think he could have finished in 10th place, no doubt about it. And that would have been actually a decent drive if he had claimed a point for 10th place. But Tsunoda ended up 12th, and Tsunoda continues to, at least on the Sunday races, to disappoint. in terms of his results, not necessarily his own driving skill. This Red Bull car, though, if it does get better starting from this weekend, we will see a response from Tsunoda, because he is definitely better than Lawson, and I think he is better than Isaac Hadjar still. Even though Hadjar has had a great start to his career, I still think Tsunoda is the most superior out of those three drivers. I think Tsunoda will start to get on top of things. It just will take a bit of time. So, yeah, let's give Tsunoda time and see what happens. But, yeah, Max Verstappen, championship-wise, is in a fantastic position. But he still needs to keep delivering results in these early races. Again, this weekend in Bahrain, if the pace is there for him to, challenge for the win, then he does need to get the win to make his season a lot easier than it probably should have been here in 2025. Let's go on, though, to McLaren, who quite rightly should be disappointed with them not winning the Japanese Grand Prix. Again, in qualifying, both drivers did not deliver their absolute best laps when it mattered. Oscar Piastri obviously had a supremely quick middle and final sector, but gave it away in the first sector, and that's why he didn't get pole. He actually had the most potential in terms of lap time he could have found on that final lap, but he didn't do it, and that's what cost him the potential race win. Because if Piastri had took pole and then led away in first and then led into turn one, I don't think Verstappen would have been able to beat Piastri. As great as Max was this past weekend, I don't think Max would have been able to beat Oscar, because Oscar was very quick in the race. He was very, very quick. So that's really what cost McLaren was qualifying. And then in the race, they had decent starts. They were very close, the two drivers, to each other. There is maybe an argument you could have of, should Lando have let Oscar through to have a go at Max when Oscar was clearly quicker at times? Maybe, but would Oscar have beaten Max? I don't think so. So it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. Second and third it is for McLaren. And yeah, it is a disappointing result because, again, whilst they've got the best car on the grid, they need to, dominate this early part of the season. And a win at Suzuka was absolutely needed, but they didn't get it. I will say, though, it's not a disaster for McLaren. Second and third is still a good result for both drivers. It's just not as great as it could have been, and maybe should have been, again, given the potential of the cars. So, yeah, not great. But this coming weekend in Bahrain is going to be very, very interesting, because this track, the Bahrain, or the Sakir rather, International Circuit, is probably going to be the weakest track for McLaren that we've been to so far in 2025. It doesn't really have a lot of what McLaren are good at. McLaren should still be quick. They've got a car that, through every type of corner is very fast. So they will be quick. They just won't be maybe as quick compared to the rest as they maybe usually are. So it is going to be a tricky weekend. But if they can win, they absolutely must win. Because Max Verstappen, I have no doubt, is going to be right there fighting for the win. Ferrari, at least in qualifying, I think are going to be right there fighting for pole. May even get pole position. They're going to be very strong, at least with Leclerc, I think, this weekend. And Mercedes, they, I think, will be in there as well. Maybe not very strong in qualifying, but definitely in the race, I think we're going to see Mercedes have a strong one. So, with all that competition, if McLaren can come out with the race win, that would be absolutely crucial. But yeah, this weekend is a must-win for McLaren, no doubt about it. And really, these next couple races in Bahrain and Jeddah are must win for McLaren. Because again, whilst they've got the car advantage, they need to capitalise on that. So they cannot afford to now, stop winning races and go a few races without a win. That would be a disaster for their championship efforts. Sorry. So, yeah, McLaren, not great at Suzuka, but not the end of the world. Again, must win this weekend in Bahrain. Let's now go on, though, to, I think Ferrari will go on to next, who, very mixed weekend, I think I would say. In qualifying, they were okay. I wouldn't say they were great. They were still missing, a third of a second to McLaren and obviously to Max in qualifying, and Leclerc ended up fourth on the grid. Wasn't that bad of a qualifying position, but the pace was a bit disappointing, I would say. And going into the race, I expected Ferrari to have the worst pace of that top four teams and end up probably 5th and 6th or 5th and 7th, something like that. But impressively, their pace was actually a bit better than expected. Leclerc comfortably, in the end, held on to 4th place. He was under pressure for quite a bit of the early laps from George Russell, but after that, Russell dropped back, hurt his tyres, and then Leclerc was able to pull away and show some decent pace. And yeah, in the end, was only a couple tenths of a second per lap on average slower than the leaders, which is not that bad considering the race pace they had again back in Shanghai. But as I said, coming into the race weekend in Japan, they had to get a podium, and they didn't get a podium. So it was overall, I would say, a failed weekend. Not a massive failure, but overall a failed weekend, because the podium is absolutely what was needed and they didn't get it. And to be fair to them, it's not like they definitely had a good chance at a podium and threw it away. They didn't have a chance at a podium because the top three were too quick. But still, a podium is what was needed and they didn't get it. So disappointing for Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton, very disappointing weekend. Awful final lap in qualifying. Then he started on the hard tyre to try and do something different compared to the rest, and it didn't work. He ended up miles behind Kimi Antonelli in 7th place. And actually, when I showed the race results on the screen, if you go and look back, Lewis Hamilton only ended up 8 seconds on track ahead of Isaac Hadjar. And remember, Hamilton pitted a lot later than Hadjar for fresh medium tyres. So I think, one, that's impressive for Racing Bulls to be, and also Williams weren't a million miles away either. Again, impressive from those teams to not be that far away compared to what we have usually seen in the last few years. But also shows just how poor of a race Lewis Hamilton had. So, yeah, just disappointing on his end, but no real surprise, because as me and Nib said in the build-up to the race on the Race Watch Along stream, Lewis Hamilton is past his best. He's not the Lewis Hamilton anymore. He is still capable, I'm sure, of the odd podium and race win, but he is not anywhere near as good as he was 5-6 years ago. That's just a fact at this point. Because the Lewis Hamilton of 5 or 6 years ago would not have finished 7th in the Japanese Grand Prix. Probably would have finished at least in 4th place in that car. So, yeah, disappointing from Hamilton. And overall, yeah, I think you'd have to say disappointing from Ferrari. As I said in my video that I did on Ferrari just over a week ago, which you can go and check out if you want, about why the Constructors' Championship already after the Chinese Grand Prix was over. It's definitely over now. They're, 80 points behind, and that gap's going to continue to grow. On the driver's side, I will still say that there is a slight bit of hope, because this weekend in Bahrain, Ferrari have definitely got a chance of winning. I'm not going to say there's no chance of winning. They can legit get pole position. They've got the car to do it. Leclerc is supremely quick around that track, and that Ferrari car should be right in the fight for pole, especially given the characteristics of the Ferrari car suiting the Sakir circuit pretty well. Whether in the race they'll have the pace to win, we'll have to find out. It's going to be tough, but maybe they'll be able to pull it off. But if, again, with Leclerc, who I think is the main contender for Ferrari if there is to be a Drivers' Championship contender for the Scuderia, if Leclerc is going to win the championship or at least contend for it, he has to win the Grand Prix this weekend. If he doesn't, it's over. Both championships are over for Ferrari because Leclerc is already 42 points behind Lando Norris. If he wins this weekend and Norris finishes like 3rd or 4th, then at least cuts the gap down nicely to 32 or just under 30 points. That would keep him in a good position going forward. But if he was to finish, say, 3rd, Leclerc, and Lando was to win or finish ahead of him in 2nd, then yeah, Drivers' Championship for me is gone, because if you look at the next couple races after the Bahrain race, you got Saudi Arabia and Miami. Those are 2 tracks where I think McLaren will be quicker and beat Ferrari. So, got to win this weekend. Absolutely no doubt about it. If Charles Leclerc wants to be world champion in 2025, he must win this weekend's Bahrain Grand Prix. Again, if he doesn't, then it's all over. One thing I will say also about Ferrari that I've noticed, I don't know if you guys noticed this as well, but characteristic-wise, this 2025 Ferrari is kind of similar to the 2019 Ferrari car in that, obviously down the straights, they're very quick, nowhere near as quick as they were in 2019 with what was, we found out, an illegal power unit. But if you look at how that 2019 car was in high speed and then slow speed corners. In slow speed corners, it sucked. It was terrible. In the high speed corners, though, it was as good at times as Mercedes that year, who obviously dominated the championship. This Ferrari is the same. And the point I'm trying to make is obviously back in 2019, Ferrari locked out the front row in Bahrain and should have won the race if Leclerc did not suffer an engine issue. So if that is absolutely true, that the characteristics of this car are pretty much similar, if not close to being the same as that car, then this weekend absolutely should be a race win opportunity. And we will see if Leclerc can do it. And I really hope, honestly, you guys know I don't support anyone, because I just want exciting racing and an exciting championship. I don't care who is fighting for the championship or race wins. It's irrelevant to me. But I think for the good of the season, I think it would be great if Leclerc won this weekend. Because at the minute, it looks like we've got a 4-way fight for the championship with Norris, Verstappen, Piastri and Russell. Ferrari, we were expecting to be in there to a degree as well. And I think, again, we need as many drivers in that championship battle as possible. And for that to happen, we need Leclerc to win this weekend. So I'm not saying I'm going to be like literally fanboying over Leclerc over the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. But if there was anyone I would want to win purely for the championship's sake, it would be Charles Leclerc to keep it, maybe a 5-way fight for the championship. But again, we will see whether Ferrari can deliver. I think definitely the opportunity is there, but whether they actually can deliver the result is another story. And finally, Mercedes-Benz, not really much to talk about with them. They really should have been ahead of Leclerc on the grid in qualifying with George Russell. Russell bottled his final lap. Put Leclerc under pressure quite early on in the race, but then dropped away because I think his tyres just fell off the cliff a bit. And then did come back at Leclerc a bit towards the end. It was a bit close, but it just wasn't close or quick enough in the end to actually put Leclerc under pressure. Kimi Antonelli, though, good weekend from him. Not a million miles away from Russell in qualifying. I think it was only a couple tenths of a second. And then in the race, went very long in the race. I think he pitted on lap, 30, 31. Went for a fresh set of hard tyres. And then by the end of the race, he was right there behind George Russell, finishing in 6th place. So a good Grand Prix from Antonelli, and another decent weekend from him as he continues to be 5th in the championship. And do not count out absolutely Antonelli at the minute, because I mean, he's 5th in the championship. He is 32 points off the championship lead. And remember, 2 of the 3 tracks we've been to so far he's never raced around. This weekend he does have experience from previous series here in Bahrain. So we should hopefully see an Antonelli that is right on the pace of Russell, if not maybe ahead of Russell. We will see. But Antonelli will get better as this season goes on. And if that Mercedes car does as well, don't count out Antonelli as a possible championship contender. But Mercedes 5th and 6th, I don't think they'll be that disappointed with that. They're still 2nd in the championship. I think they'll be satisfied with that result. But for this weekend's race in Bahrain, if they can get another podium, I think they'd be happy with that. If the race win, though, is up for grabs, then absolutely they need to try and go for it. Because if they are to keep themselves in the championship fight on the driver's side, and even maybe the constructor's side, a race win at this point of the season would not be too bad for them. But yeah, those are the front-running teams. Again, shout out to Isaac Hadjar and the Racing Bulls. What a weekend. 7th in qualifying, 8th in the race. Easily one of the drivers of the weekend. Shout out to Alex Albon as well. Another great result for Williams, and once again hammering his teammate Carlos Sainz. Oliver Bearman as well, 10th in the Haas. Having a good season so far and delivering, I think, so far on the potential we all know he has. Very, very good driver is Oliver Bearman. He just needs, the time to show us just how good he is. And so far, that's what he is doing. And he's only a few points behind Esteban Ocon in the championship. But guys, that is it for this podcast reviewing the Japanese Grand Prix. And of course, I will be back this time next week, next Monday, the day after the Bahrain Grand Prix, to review the events of the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. And just a reminder of what my content plan is for this weekend. There will not be a qualifying preview on the Friday night like I've done so far this season. That qualifying preview will be taking a bit of a rest for a few races. So I will be next on the channel live on Saturday, live at 3:30 p.m. UK time, an hour and a half before qualifying for the qualifying watch along in Bahrain, qualifying getting underway at 5 p.m. here in the UK. And then on Sunday, I'll be live for the race as well, live as usual, 2 hours before the race, and I'll be live at 2 p.m. UK time for the 4 p.m. UK time start. Nib, my co-commentator, should be on with me as well. So make sure to come along to those watch-alongs to enjoy what should be a very competitive Bahrain Grand Prix. We could have 3, I think we've definitely got 3 teams who are going to be fighting for the win this weekend, and 3 teams and multiple drivers that really have to win this weekend. So yeah, it's going to be a very exciting weekend in Bahrain. Make sure to join us for that. And then, like I said, next Monday, the day after the Bahrain Grand Prix, I will review what has gone down in Bahrain. But thank you guys for coming along for this podcast episode, and until the qualifying watch along this Saturday for the Bahrain Grand Prix, and until my next podcast next Monday, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.